The arrogant Superman is thinking nature is in our control, and not the other way around. Let them fight.
Don't act like a big shot, Hick. You just got the...
You have your fear, which might become reality. And you have Godzilla, which is reality.
Welcome back to Sludgecast's Monster Movie Stompdown. This is episode 3 for this, and like we were doing before, we're going through the entire Godzilla movie collection in chronological order. We'll take a break in between each episode to do a different monster movie, but now we're back on. We're going to continue on with Godzilla Raids Again, which was the second Godzilla film. Tonight it is going to be just me and Ruben going solo. Ruben, you want to say hi?
Hello, how's everybody doing?
So, Mark was going to be here tonight, but he forgot he had promised my mother he would take her to this revival in the area. So he is not with us tonight, even though he did watch the movie last night. But he will be back with us on the next episode. So tonight you got me and Ruben, which I think is pretty cool that it's just us, Ruben, because there's a lot I want to dig into in this one when it comes to Godzilla Raids Again. Because I was telling Ruben earlier as we were talking, prepping for the episode, that it has been quite a long time since I've watched the original Japanese version of Godzilla Raids Again. I've watched the, Gigantus the Fire Monster, the American re-edited version a lot. But the Japanese one, it's been quite a while. And there was a lot of things I noticed that I hadn't remembered or picked up on since the last time I viewed it. And I really want to jump into that. What was it for you? I mean, how long has it been since you've last seen the Japanese version, Ruben?
It's probably been about a year, because I had it originally on a DVD. I bought it solo, and I watched it a couple of times, and then I bought the Toho had a Toho Masterpiece set, so I bought it, and it had Raids Again on it, so I gave it away to my nephew, and you know how things goes up on the shelf. And when I went to watch it this weekend, I hadn't even unwrapped it yet. It was still in the wrapper, in the little box set that it came in. So it's probably been about a year.
Nice. You mean
so I watched the Japanese version.
Was it Classic Media, that Toho Master set?
Yes,
right.
Media comes in a green-looking box, and it's actually a pretty good set. It's got just about the whole Showa. Yeah, it does. It has the whole Showa Godzilla, realm on there, from the original all the way to Terror of Mechagodzilla.
Oh dang! I need to pick that up because I never got the box set. I bought those when they originally came out with the first few runs, less like Godzilla and with King of the Monsters, obviously. Then Godzilla Raids Again with Gigantus and Mothra versus Godzilla, Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster,
right.
And then what was it? Godzilla's Revenge was one, and then Terror of Mechagodzilla, I think, was the last of that first initial 5. I bought those like as soon as they came out, but I never got around to buying the box set.
Yeah, and that's the problem. They sold them individually, and then so I got a lot of those, and then all of a sudden I had this box set, and I said, you know what, I'm just going to get that box set. That was before Blu-rays, of course. When the Blu-ray sets come out, now I started trying to buy up as much of the Blu-rays as I can.
I know.
I'm just about complete.
and
so.
I bet it's not long because where Criterion just picked up the rights to the entire Showa run. I'm sure it's not going to be long before we start getting Criterion versions. And of course, I was buying all those.
If I read correctly, they're going to do 4K on some of those.
Oh man, that would be awesome.
Yeah.
Now I would think there's probably going to be just a few of those if they do them in 4K that I actually probably buy in 4K, like the original definitely, because the special effects just hold up unbelievably well.
Right.
But there might be a few I'd be like, I don't know if I want to spend the extra money for the 4K on this one.
I remember when Godzilla versus Megalon, they released it on Blu-ray and DVD, and I didn't have it on either one, so I said, well, is it worth it to get it on Blu-ray? So I just bought the DVD, and I regretted it instantly. I bought the DVD, and then I said, I should have bought the Blu-ray. So, the Blu-ray came out, and I was able to get it. I got both, but I learned my lesson there not to. There's some that you just want to say, you know what, probably the quality's not going to be that great, and it'll be fine on DVD.
Oh,
Megalon.
They knocked it out of the park with that one. Yeah.
Yeah, they
Tokyo.
did. It was very well done.
Was it Tokyo Shock that did that one, I think?
Yeah.
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah. They knocked it out of the park. Now, you do know, with your DVD, does your DVD have special features on it?
No.
Okay.
There's one out there that does have it, yeah.
I had that version.
Oh, you lucky dog.
So,
I
don't...
remember, I ordered it, and I'm like, and then it came out that they pulled a whole bunch of them.
Oh, yeah,
like,
yeah.
Man,
I had gotten that original one that had the special features, and just lucked out. I mean, that's pretty much what it was, is you just lucked out and got that first run. And I don't have it now. I had a guy for a long time. There's a local Godzilla fan in the area. We happen to always go to the same video game store, and I always hear about him. And I was talking to the guy that owns the store. His name's Timmy. It's called Pop Culture is the name of the store. And I kept telling him, we were talking about Godzilla vs. Megalon. I said, yeah, my wife just bought me the Blu-ray. I've actually got that really rare DVD that had the bonus features that weren't supposed to be released. And then I guess he told this guy, and the guy said, man, anytime this, talking about me, anytime he comes in, tell him I want to buy that. I'll offer him money for it. And so there was a lot of like messaging back and forth between me and this guy through this store. And I finally, after my wife got me the Blu-ray, because the special features are really, really cool. But to be honest, most of the special features I already had found through YouTube or bootlegs and kind of gathered. I got like 2 DVDs that are just nothing but rare Godzilla stuff. I mean, even like the 1985 Dr. Pepper commercials, just anything I could find. So I found I ended up, he bought it for me for $75. So I was like,
wow.
Yeah. So I was like, all right. I mean, they were going up to.
Yeah, when I ordered it, I'm like, man, hopefully I'll get it. The first thing I did was pop it in and see if it didn't have it.
Dude, I completely looked out on it. Like, they were going for good money.
Yeah.
Good. I mean, I saw a couple of those go on eBay for about $100 to $125. So.
Yeah, and I pre-ordered it and everything, so I thought I was going to get a first run, but it was one of those things, like you said.
It was luck of the draw.
You got lucky or you didn't.
It really was.
It was luck of the draw.
All right, well let's jump into Godzilla Raids Again. So, and again, this is the second Godzilla film. Toho went really quick into production on this one after King of the Monsters, or just Gojira. Godzilla Raids Again actually came out April 24th of 1955. So if we remember, the first Godzilla came out November 3rd, 1954. So you're talking, less than 6 months. They film and release another film. So very quick production on this one, very quick release. Warner Brothers released it many years later, actually, in America. It didn't get released in America under the title Gigantus the Fire Monster, and we'll get into some stuff about what happened there here in a few minutes. But Warner Brothers released it on a double bill with Teenagers from Outer Space on May 21st in 1959. So we didn't even get it here for a little over 4 years from its initial Japanese release. Now, it did pretty decent in the box office in Japan. It was actually, I think it was within the top 10 highest grossing films of the year. They sold almost 9 million tickets in Japan. So, I mean, it was the third most attended film in Japan during the Showa era. So, I mean, it did really well. Obviously, still off the hype of the first Godzilla film. Grossed around 1.7 million yen for Toho, which made it the 4th or 5th highest grossing film for them that year. So it did okay. Did pretty good in the theaters, but it was heavily criticized. Not just the American release we got, but the Japanese release as well was criticized over there, and it was all pretty much a major consensus of it was extremely rushed. Of course, you got a different director this time around than you did the first time, which I think was a big problem with it. If they had kept Inashiro Honda directing this thing, I think it would have been a lot better. But they brought in Motoyoshi Oda, which I'm not even sure really what else he's done. Do you know anything else that Oda has done, Ruben?
No, I sure don't. I mean, I just knew of this one, and that was it.
Yeah, so
if he did something else, I didn't know about it.
Yeah, it's beyond me too. So, but they still had some come back. I mean, Takeo Murata was one of the guys that wrote the script for this one, and he worked heavily writing the first Godzilla movie. Jumping on was one of the writers was Shigeki. His last name's Hidaka, Shigeki Hidaka, and he worked on a few more Godzilla screenplays throughout the years. So he came on board with this. Of course, you got Tomoyuki Tanaka returning as producing it. Another thing that I think really hurt it was Akira Ifukube not doing the music score. Masaru Sato, I think, is the name of the guy that did the music score for this, which, and we'll kind of get into it when we start talking about what we feel about it, but I think the music score definitely lacked a bit in this film. But of course, special effects continued on by Eiji Shiburaya. Haruo Nakajima came back playing Godzilla in a much lighter suit, much smaller suit, so he was able to do a lot more. You had Katsumi Tezuka, I believe, is who played Anguirus. Of course, we got the return of Takashi Shimura, Dr. Yamane, reprises his role, albeit a little briefly, but he's at least in it. From the original film, which gave that congruency to it. But we had a couple really cool newcomers to the Godzilla series. Hiroshi Kazumi, who played Tsukioka, he was in this movie, but he's also known as, he's been in Dagora and Matango, Atragon, but he's no stranger to Godzilla. After this, he went on and did Mothra. He was Dr. Shinichi in Mothra, but he was Professor Mira in Mothra vs. Godzilla. Continued that role in Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster. Went on, what else was he in? He was in Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla. The 74 one is Professor Wakura. He was the geologist Minami in Godzilla 1985, 84. Reprised his role as Chujo in Godzilla Tokyo SOS. So this was the beginning for Godzilla movies, as we talked when we got into Godzilla King of the Monsters, how there was a lot of reoccurring roles. He was one of the big names. This was him really breaking out. There's actually several guys in there that we see coming back a few times. What is the guy's name? You might be able to help me here. He's on the self-defense force. Tajima, I think was his name. He was the guy that was always running and doing stuff. Like they'd say, "Oh, go do this," and he was the dude like, "Okay, I'll go do it." And it was always that's I'm talking about, that same guy. It's actually the actors. It's Yoshio Tsuchiya. Of course, he was in Seven Samurai with Takashi Shimura, but he's also in. He was in The Mysterians, H-Man, Varan. He may have been in Battle from Outer Space, but he was in Matango as well, Frankenstein vs. Baragon. But his most biggest role is actually as the controller of Planet X from The Invasion of the Astro Monster, or Godzilla vs. Monster Zero.
Oh, yeah.
So this was his first role. So it's pretty cool because you got a lot of those familiar tokusatsu and kaiju film actors starting in this movie, and there was a couple other guys in this as well. That has one of the convicts, I can't remember which one it was, he's been in a couple films, so you got to see a lot of these actors start to show up in this film. So I do think that had a lot going for it on this one. Was there anybody else you could think of that looked familiar to you when you watched it?
Yes, and that's what I was about to mention. I was watching it, and a lot of these actors look familiar, and I'm like, it's like, sometimes for me what happens is like, okay, I've seen them before, or maybe I haven't. Hold on, maybe I'm just recollecting this movie. Gigantus, the fire monster, instead of this one. I'm trying to figure out. But yes, I did notice a lot of familiar faces. For me, it happens quite a bit. I'll see a face, and I'm like, I know I've seen him somewhere before, but I just can't place where.
Right.
and that happened quite a bit on this film as I was watching it. And two, this movie was another one, like I think I mentioned it with the original Godzilla, that I had no access to it until, the last 10 years or so. Like Godzilla Raids Again, I didn't get to see that till they finally released it on. I didn't have it on VHS. If they released it, I didn't know anything about it.
Right. Yeah.
So it was. If it came out on DVD, and that was the first thing, I said, "Oh, this will complete my set." I remember I had a little, and I still have it somewhere. I had a list of all the Godzilla movies up to that time. I made that list. And I had VHS and I had DVD, because there wasn't even Blu-ray when I made that list. And I would check a box whenever I'd get it, and I'd put down, okay, no DVD available, like Godzilla 84 and 85. There was no DVD for the longest time. I had it on VHS, but that was it. And Godzilla Raids Again was one of them that I didn't have the VHS. I didn't have anything until they finally released the DVD, in 2006, 2007, something like that.
Right. Yeah.
Was the first time it showed up, and then of course recently they came out with the Toho came out with their Masters deal, and that looked a whole lot better too than the original one. That too, I'll buy a DVD 3 times sometimes because they'll improve it, especially Toho. To me, Toho has a habit of, we'll let you have a copy, but it's not the greatest copy in the world.
Right, because
to America, and then if you want to watch the real thing, you got to get the Japanese version, and then all of a sudden you see it in its great glory.
They're good. They are so good at doing that.
Yeah, I mean, so like I remember I had the DVD of I still have it, King Kong versus Godzilla. I gotta make sure I get that right. And it was not a very good copy. Then they came out with this viewer, and it looked so good. This Toho Masters, and I'm like, man, this looks great. And then the Blu-ray came out, and I was blown away. And I'm like, man, we just get this in round one.
They know.
I did.
They know how to keep it going. And I'm trying to think.
Yeah.
And it's killing me because I was excited when I was watching this to tell you that, and of course, and all of our listeners too, and it's driving me nuts that I cannot think of the actor's name. But one of those 3 convicts that escape, and they end up dying in the tunnel from the waters that fled through it.
Yeah.
One of them, and it's driving me crazy. But one of those convicts, I cannot think of his name. Anyways, he played smaller roles in other tokusatsu films, but he's the same guy that played King Kong in King Kong vs. Godzilla, and also played King Ghidorah in Godzilla vs. Monster Zero. So that was
really? So
yes,
a suit actor. He ended up being a suit actor. Huh?
Yep, and it's driving me nuts. Like, I'm one of those guys that's like, I gotta know, but I don't want to look it up too if I'm live on the show. So it's like, this is where having Mark would have been good, because Mark does that stuff. So, but yeah, so one of those convicts, he goes on to play, became a really good suit actor. Obviously, doing Kong and King Ghidorah for future films. So, but again, so really good cast. A lot of obviously was the first big movie that we got to see a lot of the familiar faces with, which was awesome. So, I mean, it did good. And of course, Warner Brothers picked it up. And before we get into what we liked or didn't like, of course, we definitely need to talk about what became, or the road to Gigantus the Fire Monster when it came out in 1959 in America. Because initially, Warner Brothers did not, when it got the rights to it, of course, it was one of their smaller subsidiary companies. But when the rights were bought to bring it over here, the original plan was to actually scrap all the Japanese acting scenes, keep only the monster scenes, and even create a few new ones to create a movie called The Volcano Monsters.
Right, they even shipped Toho shipped the Godzilla and Ghidorah's costumes over to us.
Yeah,
for that.
They actually. Yeah. And I'm going to send this to you later, Ruben, because I actually managed to find an actual picture of those suits. And
really?
Yes. And I was like, it's pretty sweet, because when you look at it, though, Because I always thought, or knew, hey, they just sent the Godzilla suit and the Anguirus suit from this movie, or Anguirus suit, and sent it over to him to use. But I'd heard rumors that one of the suits was actually remade, that they'd sent over. Of course, they got lost over the years before it was actually finally released.
Yeah.
The Anguirus suit was the same suit from Godzilla Raids Again. However, they did create a new Godzilla suit. And when I was able to find the picture, it's very clear that the suit was not the same one that was in Godzilla Raids Again. So we've definitely seen, we've definitely seen a difference. It looks a lot more, as far as facial features and the body style, way more like the original, but still much more slimmed down, like the one that we saw in Godzilla Raids Again.
And I always assumed they were just duplicates.
That's what I thought too for many years.
Yeah.
But so I'll be sending you that too when we get off the show, because it's really cool. I was like, I cannot believe finally there it is, black and white, or actually it's like yellow and dark brown monotone picture, but was able to find it. So that was the plan. It was to create a new movie, the Volcano Monsters, and have these creatures, because they were going to call Godzilla Gigantus, because they wanted it to be a new creature. In Godzilla Raids Again, they explain that obviously it's not the first Godzilla that's in Godzilla, but another one of the same species, and that this Godzilla and Anguirus were both awakened by the same atomic bomb, and kind of like they were fighting when they died, or whatever, went into hibernation, and just woke back up fighting again. So it was definitely a different one, but the American company, Warner Brothers, wanted to make it a completely different creature. So that's where Gigantus came from. Obviously, a lot of finances fell through. One of the production companies went bankrupt in 1957. So what Warner Brothers did was they said, okay, well, we'll just dub the film and release it as Gigantus the Fire Monster, and got talked into releasing it as a double bill with Teenagers from Outer Space. Yeah. And in the process of that is how we got the heavily edited Gigantus the Fire Monster. Because anybody that's seen both versions knows there's a lot of differences, especially with what the dubbing talks about. Huge differences. A lot of editing difference. One of the things that sticks out in my mind instantly, and Ruben, you may be thinking of it too at the same time, is the meeting they have at the cabinet building with Dr. Yamane, how much that's changed. Adding footage from old American monster dinosaur films, they completely changed that movie, or that that dialogue system. The intro sequence, so much different.
Yeah, they even dubbed old Godzilla with a different roar and everything. It was just
that's right. Did they used Anguirus' roar for Godzilla for most of it?
Yeah,
and they didn't even seem to do.
The first time my boy saw that, he goes, "That's not Godzilla's roar." No, they changed it.
Oh yeah,
he didn't like that one bit.
And they weren't even really consistent when they did it, because there's even a couple times where you do hear the actual Godzilla roar come through, but it's one, 2 or 3 times, not many, but it's there. But it wasn't consistent. One of the cool things that they did, though, dubbing this film, was this was the first film that George Takei did his, because he dubbed a lot of Godzilla films, or worked with the same company. But so George Takei of Star Trek, this was his first time doing a Godzilla film, which is pretty cool. So it went on the road over here, heavily re-edited, redubbed, branded as Gigantus the Fire Monster. They kind of focused a little bit more on Anguirus than they did Godzilla. And it did decent, again, like it did in Japan. It did pretty decent over here. Of course, it helped being on the double bill with Teenagers from Outer Space, but again, got criticized for being too rushed, or just not knowing. It's obviously not as good as the first one, but it felt rushed. A lot of this movie felt rushed. And the movie as a whole, it follows Tsukioka and Kobayashi, these 2 airplane pilots for a tuning company. One of them crash lands on the outside of an island because his engine dies, and they discover Godzilla and Anguirus, and then it just goes from there. And it's kind of focused around them and defeating these monsters and stopping this catastrophe from happening again. It wasn't too much put into it, I felt like, on this one. So, but it still did good. The biggest and most important thing, it did a lot. Bring this, like we were talking a minute ago, a lot of actors that we would see grow in the tokusatsu and kaiju, franchises. The thing I think it did the most and the best was it introduced the monster versus monster formula that became everything Godzilla.
Yeah, definitely. That this one was the first that had a kaiju battle, so to speak.
And I think a very good one. That's, to me, was the main highlight of the film, was the fight between Godzilla and Anguirus. I mean, every time that those two were on the screen together, I'm just like, man. Then of course, they made the mistake by accident when they were putting the film together, and we talked about this, and Ruben, you brought it up when we did Godzilla King of the Monsters, on how they filmed at a higher frame rate, so that when they, or higher speed, so that when it came back to normal, it slowed them down because they could only be in the suits for so long, to make them look, bigger and majestic. They forgot to do that in this film for a lot of the shots. So there's a lot of times where it looks like they are going 100 miles an hour, and I think that actually ended up helping it, because some of the spots where they did that looked really aggressive. And so to me, I was kind of like, that's a mistake that actually worked in their favor.
Yeah, the speed helped out. It looked more like, like when you get two beasts fighting each other, it's not in slow motion. And from what I read, and actually it's in the same book that Godzilla FAQ.
Great book.
And it was actually done, that it was done by accident. That one of the techs accidentally slowed it down instead of speeding it up, and that's the result. And that if they were rushed. So what they decided to do is they looked at the footage and said, you know what, this ain't bad. We're going to go with it. And I think they were correct. It ended up looking all right. I mean, it looked a little wonky, but it still was a good battle. The battle was real good. And you noticed that they were, both suit actors had a lot more mobility. Or the Godzilla anyway.
Oh, definitely.
You had more mobility in that suit versus the first movie. A lot more mobility, and of course, Anguirus, this is the first time he's on screen, so I have no reference for him. But both suit actors did a fine job, and it came out. It looked real good, even with the speed up of the film there.
Yeah, well, I definitely think that Tezuka, the guy that played Anguirus, I don't know if he continued. I can't think about it. I'd have to look it up, but his portrayal of Anguirus in this film, I think, honestly, was better than any other portrayal I've seen, as far as movement and just, his aggressiveness and character and the way he moved in this film was much better than any other time in the Showa films, I think.
And it must have been pretty rough to play. I mean, I assume he had to play it pretty much on all fours most of the time.
He did. I mean, when you look at, especially when he's coming out of the water, you can definitely see in a couple of shots, I mean, he is on all fours. His knees are bent in the back. And
so I imagine it was pretty rough in that suit to do that, and then be able to, a lot of people don't realize when you're a suit actor like that, your moves inside the suit have to be exaggerated so much for it to come across. And if you don't do it right, it's not going to look good on film, through the suit. And that's why Andy, I always forget his last name. You know who I'm talking about.
Andy Serkis.
Yeah. So, that's why he's so sought after, because he knows he needs to exaggerate stuff to make it come out through the screen, even though it's CGI. And same goes for the suit actors. And I thought he did excellent, because you forget it's a suit. It's two monsters fighting it out, and you forget that it's a suit. And that goes to the acting, I've always said they should have awards for that. They should have awards for suit actors and for CGI and all that. I don't know why they don't get Academy Awards for that here.
Oh, man. I think we've talked before. I just think it's really a shame and a crime almost that they don't give these suit actors. I mean, because you go back forever, especially with guys who started this, like Haruo Nakajima, Tezuka, to guys like Tom Woodruff Jr., who was Pumpkinhead, and he's most known as being the alien in the Alien films, to now Andy Serkis, King Kong, Gollum, Caesar. I mean, these are great actors that really have to take. They have to. I mean, these creatures would not be alive if it wasn't for those men inside the suit. You know, they bring them to life.
And they just don't get. I mean, I don't know. I call it lack of respect. Maybe that's too strong a term.
I would agree with you.
I'm like, yeah. I mean, it's a lack of respect. Like, hey, these guys are working harder than some of these actors because they have to. It's a physical toll as well as, you know, they have to know how to act. It's just not just because they, you know, and you know, they have, everything has to be perfect. Otherwise, it's not going to look good on film.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I always have a lot of respect for suit actors, especially, you know, when it comes to the Godzilla stuff, because that stuff's just amazing for its time. You know, people make fun of it now. Oh, you know, look how fake it is. You got to remember when this was made in the 50s and how innovative this was.
Oh, yeah.
You know, suit versus claymation. You know, yeah, Kong was neat. You know, in the claymation, I call it claymation. It was stop motion. Versus the suit, there's always been a which one's better. I always preferred the suit myself. You know, I love the Sinbad movies and all that. You know, I love them, but there was just something about the suit actors from Toho or for Japan.
Yeah, it was. I would have to agree with you 100% on that one. I mean, there's a few times. I mean, while Willis O'Brien did a phenomenal job with Kong, I mean, you know, he did a great job with the dinosaurs in the Lost World, and I think he really honed his skill in King Kong. To me, Harryhausen is who really made stop motion what it was, because he was better than anybody else. I mean, you said like the Sinbad films, but he went through so much. To me, the only stop motion that I can think of that I would put on par from back in the day, when, you know, so we're not going to talk about like, you know, Tim Burton's Nightmare Before Christmas. You know, from that day and era would honestly be 20 Million Miles to Earth, because he poured so much into it. And I can think of the one scene where the Ymir from that movie is laying on that big table when they've got him knocked out, but he's breathing. And unlike anybody else who did stop motion at the time, no one was able to put characterization in. I mean, he made those monstrous characters. You know, when the Ymir got hurt, he would make sure that his face showed it, but you also got to see him breathe. You know, I mean, like, because he would put a bag inside of him and pump, you know, air in and release it to make it look like he breathes. So that'd be the only film I could think of that would stand toe to toe with Suitmation, because Suitmation, I mean, they did it was so much easier, even though it was extremely hard for him to really put across that emotion and characteristics of the animal or the monster that they're playing. Such an underrated art form, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I know the Suitmation, the drawback is the facial expressions and stuff that don't come through, but I don't know, maybe it's just a nostalgia thing for me. You know, as a kid growing up, you know, I saw both, but man, if there was a Toho film or any Japanese kaiju on, man, my day stopped. Whatever I was doing, I was inside. I was watching it.
Oh, you know, I'm with you on that one, big time. So.
Yeah.
But well, right on. So let's get into what we liked and didn't like about the film, because there's a lot of stuff that I want to compare that I didn't think about until I watched Godzilla Raids Again last night. And again, for me, it had been many years since I've watched the original Japanese, but I've watched Gigantus the Fire Monster more than a few more times. Well, I should say the classic media version, which was redubbed and made more sense, and they even had the title card of Godzilla Raids Again on it. So that was a better version, I think. But for me, going back and watching it, this is one of those things, and I was telling my wife this earlier, I didn't expect what I'm about to say to come out of my mouth until after I watched this last night. I actually think I prefer Gigantus the Fire Monster over Godzilla Raids Again after watching it, mainly because of two really big reasons. The first being the lack of music in Godzilla Raids Again versus the American counterparts, which I know, man, they had so many, like, the soundtrack they used for Gigantus the Fire Monster, there was so many classic sci-fi music from other movies but with that lack of music, because music does so much. Of course, I mean, you know, being a musician, but for anybody who views a movie, music sets the tone and helps push along the viewer. And I felt like there was so many times watching Godzilla Raids Again, I was like, why is there no music right here? Like, there should be something to pump me up or get me, you know, a little intense. There was just nothing, absolutely nothing. And the same went for the sound effects. You know, I think of the moment when Godzilla and Anguirus are coming around that castle. Anguirus is on the backside. And they're just staring at each other. And it's just, it literally is like 20 seconds of silence where I'm like, okay, if you're not going to have them roaring and they are death staring, because it is a great scene. I mean, that shot was, I loved it. But I kept sitting there going, man, why isn't there music or something to get just to intensify what I'm seeing on screen? Yeah. And I recall Gigantic Fire Monster, you know, they had Anguirus roaring, and it was actually one of the few times that Godzilla actually had his Godzilla roar at that moment. You know what I mean? And it made it much better. So I was really kind of astonished looking back at it after last night, going, wow. For me, I really do. I like the American version better because of that sole fact. You know, I mean, both versions are still extremely rushed. I really feel like they did. I mean, special effects obviously weren't as good. I mean, I don't know if you noticed this or not when you watched it, Ruben, but I think this is the only film, but never in this movie does Godzilla's dorsal plates ever light up when he goes, before he blows his rectifier.
I did notice that, and I also noticed his his breath was not as what's the word I'm looking for? Wasn't as convincing.
No,
as it was in the first one. It was obvious that it was rushed. And I believe it or not, I agree with you. I prefer Gigantus over Godzilla Raids Again. It sounds
the only one.
Blasphemy. Awesome. It sounds like blasphemy. I just did that, but I noticed that there was something missing from the film, and it was music. And that's a big part of it. Not to get off subject, but I remember watching a documentary on the original Halloween, with John Carpenter's Halloween, and they went into that. They talked about the music, and they showed the scene where she just finishes poking Michael Myers in the eye, and she thinks she's killed him, and he's lying dead in the bedroom.
Right.
And she goes over by the door. So they play the scene without any music, and it's just dull. And then they insert John Carpenter's soundtrack, and then all of a sudden, you're just like, look behind you. It makes the scene, and they go into it extensively in that documentary, and that's what was missing on Godzilla Raids Again. I feel that they rushed it, so there was no the effects were rushed, and music was lacking, and even though they had some of the same writers, I felt the plot was not nearly as well done as the original Godzilla.
I agree with that too. There was nothing, no depth to it.
Yeah, there was the characters were there, and they tried to get you emotionally involved because I'm terrible with names, but that one pilot, his friend, one of the main pilots, and he has a girlfriend, and he's got that little black book, and he wants to,
Kobayashi.
Kobayashi, and then he ends up, of course, getting killed by Godzilla's breath, as he dive bombs into Godzilla and tries to distract him, and so you could see that they were trying to make you connect with them, but I never really connected with them.
Yeah, I couldn't.
Not the way I connected with the characters in the original Godzilla. And maybe I'm just spoiled from watching the original Japanese version of Godzilla versus this one. And I understand they rushed it because they were trying to, take advantage of the hype, or, studios need to make money so they can make more movies.
Yeah.
But I agree with you. It was lacking. And in Gigantus, even though it was redone, and it was heavily edited, but it kept my interest a little more, if that makes any sense to you.
It did. I mean, there was more
Yeah.
to make it enjoyable. I mean, even and again with the music, I mean, even what music that was in there in Godzilla Raids Again, I felt like Sato's themes were really out of place. You know, I mean, a lot of it was very popish and happy, and I'm like, well, this should maybe be in a propaganda film of some kind, not a monster movie. You know, there was no real doom and gloom in it, like there should have been.
Yeah.
You know, to really make you feel the horror that was, you know, happening and unfolding in front of the screen. But I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
They tried, like in the meeting, he said they showed the footage from the original Godzilla, and I felt like in that meeting they were trying to do that, but it just didn't come through.
Oh, and again, I think it's because there was nothing, no music, no theme. I mean, it's just like they're sitting there. I'm like, we're just watching silent recaps of the original film. Like, this is kind of weird, you know. Even the completely, to me, just horribly edited mishap of the video they show in the American version of that meeting was so much better. Just because they put life to it, an explanation to why the monsters are there, and there's that really creepy sci-fi music in the background, and there was more to it. You know, I mean, the movie had a lot going for it, but it had a lot because of the rush production that didn't go for it. Actually, I mean, one of my favorite scenes, even though I like the American version better, was actually taken out of the American version, but it's in the Japanese, and it's at the end where they're on the island trying to, you know, bury Godzilla in the ice, where one of the planes comes down. I mean, it was one of those things where it's like, man, I forgot that was in here. I had to retake it last night and rewind it and watch it again because I thought it was awesome. Where Godzilla just, I mean, like a beast, just drills one of those planes with his hand out of midair.
Yeah.
Oh man, that was awesome.
That was very, you know, King Kongish. It reminded me of when King Kong was up on the Empire State Building.
Yeah.
Just grabbed that plane and I said, hey, look at that. And it is in the Japanese version.
Yeah, and I thought that was great.
Actually a highlight. Yeah, that was a highlight of, you know, he's still, you know, he's halfway buried and he's still, actually, I think he breaks out there and that's when he grabs that plane and just.
Yeah, that's at that point.
Annihilates it, yeah.
So it had a lot going for it. I mean, what did you know, what were your feelings and takes on, you know, what you liked, didn't like?
Well, I've already said some of it when I was just a minute ago. But what I liked about it is, first, I liked the battle, of course. I thought that was pretty well done, even though, like I said, it was a mishap with the filming. I thought it worked out for the better. It's the only film when Anguirus is actually a foe rather than a friend. So that was kind of tough because I've seen all the rest of the Godzilla movies before I saw Godzilla Raids Again. So to have Anguirus as a foe rather than a friend was kind of weird to me. I had to get used to it. But then I realized, well, this movie was way before.
Right.
And Godzilla is still an enemy of Japan. And Anguirus ends up being an enemy also. What I liked about it is they kept their continuity pretty well from the first film, from Godzilla. You know, they went on to explain. You know, he didn't change any of the, you know, origin story or anything, and they didn't deny that there was another. You know, they didn't just start fresh and say, "Oh, look, he must have survived somehow." They just said, "Hey, look, there's another Godzilla."
Yeah.
And apparently, now we got this Anguirus to deal with. And what I didn't like about it was just basically, I didn't think the plot was engaging enough for me. You know, I know a lot of people would care about they just want to see monsters fight, but you know, the plot needs to get, you know, there has to be something there for the plot. And I know in the other Godzilla movies, you know, it's not like Godzilla versus Megalon had the best plot in the world. You know, in fact, the plot was just kind of there, kind of just like, okay, we have these battles and we're gonna have something in between. But after watching Godzilla, freshly watching the original Godzilla, I expect more now, and I expected more out of Godzilla Raids Again. Even knowing that it was rushed, I thought, well, they have some of the same writers, so it should be good. You know, that's what you would think.
Yeah.
And but I thought that was the weakest part, was just the plot, and special effects weren't up to par. Then you're right, no fins glowing on this one. I didn't think that his breath was up to par with his, even the original one. It just wasn't there as well. But that being said, all in all, it was a fun film. It was good to see them fight, and it was still fun.
It was good. I was sitting back, I was thinking about it too. I mean, because I've stated what I liked and didn't like about the film, but go back and kind of ranking it in my mind of where would I place this on the Godzilla totem pole, and they're, even looking back and seeing all the mistakes and how rushed it is, I do still think this is a pretty good Godzilla film, and there are 3 or 4 that I would put below this, definitely. I mean, Godzilla Raids Again, forever and always, will actually be at the bottom of the totem pole for me. So I would take this way over that. And there's a few other ones, I'm one of those few for the Heisei series. Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah, I wasn't a big fan of it. It got a little too cheesy. It's like they tried to capture the magic of the old alien stories from the Showa era, like, Invasion of the Astro Monster or Godzilla vs. Gigan, but they just totally fell off the rail with that one. Or Godzilla vs. Megaguirus, I think one of the weaker ones in the Millennium series. So there's several that I would put below.
You're right, because it was funny that you said that, because when I was watching it, and I was like, you know what, this is one of my least favorite Godzilla movies. Not that I didn't enjoy it, but like if I had to rank them, it would be in my bottom 5.
Yeah, definitely would be.
It would be my bottom
for
5
me,
for sure. And it's just like, if I had to choose, if I had to do a top 5, it would not be in my top 5.
Oh, no.
It would be in my top 10. Yeah, it wouldn't even be in my top 10.
Not at all.
And I'm like, man, and when I was preparing for this, I'm like, man, I wonder if he's going to be ready for me to tell him this is one of my least favorite Godzilla movies. And then you come out and say it, I'm like, oh, good. Now I can say it out loud. I was kind of like, man, I really don't. If I had to rank them, I mean, I'd put even something. A lot of people say, "Oh, Son of Godzilla, come on." I'm like, well,
it had more moments, I think.
A lot of those, yeah. I mean, a lot of them, and I have a hard time with this too, separating what I enjoy, because some of it is nostalgia.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of it is nostalgia. That's why Star Wars fans get in arguments, over new Star Wars versus old Star Wars, because a lot of them, they're 40-year-old guys or 50-year-old guys like me, and they want to feel that nostalgia, and they're just not going to get that out of these new films. They're just not going to get that back. And with Godzilla, it's the same way. A lot of these, a lot of people don't like, I'm trying to think of a good one. A lot of people don't like Godzilla 2000. Oh, that's one of the, but for me, it's one of my favorites because I got to see it with my son. And it was one of his first, he got to see, that was one of, he got Megalon first, of course, but this was one that he was excited for. He couldn't wait for it to come out on DVD. We didn't get to see it in the theaters like you did. You were pretty lucky.
Yeah, so I'd say there's some.
So for me, there's a lot of nostalgia to it, and sometimes I have trouble. Like they'll say, "Oh, this movie." I'm like, man, I kind of like that. But then if I sit down to watch Godzilla 2000, it reminds me of RJ as a 6 or 7-year-old kid, watching it, because it came out, it came out later on DVD. So. So that nostalgia comes through, and with Godzilla Raids Again, well, nostalgia's not there because I didn't even get to watch it until I was an adult. That was the first time I got to watch it as an adult. So something like, a lot of people don't like Terror Mechagodzilla. I personally love it.
Oh, man, I'm with you on that one. I love that movie.
Yeah, I just love it. But, no. These are so much better, but that has a nostalgia connected to it to me. And so that's like automatic 2 stars. If you're doing a 5-star system,
Right.
nostalgia gives it 2 stars.
It
right off the
does.
bat.
I'm with you. I'm with you 100% on that. I mean, because when I think of Terror Met Godzilla, it really is. It's nostalgia because instantly in my mind, I remember sitting in front of, weren't had much money, so we still had the old wooden box TV, that we had for ever since I was a little kid. But turning on TNT's Monster Vision, man, that's what I remember when I think of Terror Met Godzilla. And then that leads to, I remember getting up every morning, I turn on TNT and watching Ultra 7, so it's very nostalgic. All these movies, and even with too, like Godzilla 2000, there's a lot of flaws in that movie, but I love that movie because it's nostalgic. Because for me, that was my first real Godzilla film in a movie theater. I went and saw the '98 TriStar disaster, so not only was it my first real Godzilla movie, it was a redemption for what TriStar had done. So, and it was very nostalgic for me buying my first Godzilla ticket, and so I can definitely see and agree with that too. When it comes to a lot of these films, I mean, Godzilla Raids Again, Gigantic Fire Monster, either one, definitely lower on the totem pole, but still fun, still good. And, there's definitely worse Godzilla movies out there. Or, well, a whole lot worse monster movies out there. We could throw out Young Gary and.
Oh yeah. If you want to throw in other monster movies, and all of a sudden it becomes the top 10.
Yeah, really quickly.
Real quick, it moves up in the rank.
It does.
I've seen some pretty bad ones, but a lot of people, why do you watch some of these bad ones? Well, they're still fun to watch. They're bad,
absolutely.
What was bad that they're fun?
There was that one that, and it was an American one, came out in the late 90s, called Gargantuan. It was about the giant salamander. You remember that one?
Yeah, I do.
Man, terrible film. So much fun to watch. It's great. Even the Young Gary remake that came out in the early 2000s with the American actors, in a Korean film, that is, if you're not a monster movie fan, I don't know how anyone could make it through it. It's pretty rough, but because the acting is so bad. But it's still a fun film. It's really, really good. It's that niche of movies. And Godzilla Raids Again, it's definitely I think it's got its place, for a lot of reasons. Anguirus, I think, is always going to be one of the greatest Godzilla monsters that we'll ever see. I was really bummed down the line in GMK when Shusuke Kaneko, his original plan was to put, Varan and Anguirus in there instead of Mothra and Ghidra, because he was going to have Baragon, Anguirus and Varan. I was so stoked about that, and I understand why they put Mothra and Ghidra in there because they're bigger names, but Anguirus was always that one, man. Like, even in the show, as he was Godzilla's ally, it's just like you can't help but root for him because while he pretty much loses every fight he's ever in unless Godzilla helps, his spirit is just on it. When thinking of the '74 Mechagodzilla, when he fights Mechagodzilla himself, he gets his butt kicked, but he gets back up. That's what I've always loved about Anguirus.
Yeah, except in those NES games. Have you ever played any of those NES?
Yes, I did. Yes.
Anguirus is one of the ones that is if you play as him, I've always would pick him, and I drive RJ crazy because he picked Godzilla or some giant monster. Then I'd beat him with Anguirus, and he just didn't understand that. But in those games, Anguirus actually had pretty good defense and it had pretty good offensive moves.
Oh yeah.
And you just had to know how to use them. But other than the NES games, you're right. Unless you want to talk about Gabra and all those
man,
show monsters. Yeah, Anguirus is one of the weaker ones. And we're just talking about that the other day. You had these little, not Gabra. Yeah, Gabra, and you had all these little monsters on Monster Island. They were just there in the way, pretty much, but they were just there. Discounting those, Anguirus is, always getting his butt handed to him, unfortunately. But he is a fun character, and he's always an ally. He always ends up contributing in the battle the best that he can, and, opens the door for Godzilla or somebody else to come in and fight. But, he is what he is, but it was fun to see him fight Godzilla.
It was fun. Because I do think, as far as the Showa era, that fight sequence between Anguirus and Godzilla is definitely one of the better. I mean, it's one of the worst of the Godzilla films, in my opinion. But that actual fight, I mean, that's one to where I can go back and I can watch just the fight over and over again because it's so good. So I mean, it's great film. I mean, it's a Godzilla film. I'm going to love it. It's ranked kind of low, but still a great film, and gave us so much. A whole slew of actors being their first film that we would grow to love and enjoy seeing in future Godzilla movies and other tokusatsu and kaiju films, and bringing us Godzilla's biggest ally and starting the whole monster versus monster movies. Because this was, I mean, I can't think of a single monster movie prior to, and not just in Japanese, but any monster movie prior to Godzilla Raids Again, where it was literally just a monster versus monster. I mean, you had Kong fighting the T-Rex or things like that, but I mean, the whole picture was about these two monsters battling it out. It wasn't just a scene here that happened.
Right. I think you're right. I couldn't think of anything either. That also came up while I was watching. I'm like, man, was there any other movies that were actually, the plot of the movie was, the battle was part of the plot, not just like Kong, where it was just like, okay, well, I'm going to protect her, so here comes this beast, and I got to defeat him.
Right.
It was more of a, just a sidebar or subplot, where this is actually, the whole movie is about them colliding, and of course Japan trying to repel the attack, because they're fighting right in the middle there, and they're just tearing up the whole city, and that castle's getting it again.
Oh yeah, man!
It does just about it.
Every Godzilla film, it seems like.
They just rebuild it, and it gets destroyed again.
They have the best insurance.
Yeah, I know it.
Right.
They just rebuild it, and they rebuild it. Here comes Kong and Godzilla, gonna knock it down again. So it's just over and over again. It's funny as you get to be an adult, you're like, they already destroyed that building. How'd they rebuild so fast? Type of thing.
They're just that good.
But yeah.
So it did.
As far as Godzilla movies goes, this one is decent. I mean, ranks in the bottom, but still, if you want to compare it to other monster movies, I would pick it over.
Oh, definitely.
At least a dozen other monster movies. At the very least.
Yeah.
And it's funny that you mentioned Megaguirus, because I didn't. When I got it, I'm like, "Oh, it is one of the weak ones." It's funny that you say that, because I agree with that. I didn't think that was one of the good ones. It was one of those movies that I've watched maybe twice since I've gotten it.
Yeah, I've maybe twice for me too on that one.
Yeah, and while all the others around it, they get regular rotation.
I think the Millennium series, especially if you took Megaguirus out of the Millennium series, I think you'd have an almost flawless series of films right there. Yeah,
because they really went all out and tried to get that magic that Godzilla and even Raids Again has. Groundbreaking stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember reading how they tried to, they were trying just to get the right director. And, they wanted to make sure that it was somebody who understood Godzilla and was a Godzilla fan. They just didn't want to they didn't want to do a Dean Devlin type of thing, where this guy goes, yeah, I'll make it for you, but I already don't care for Godzilla. And, I mean, he's even admitted, well, I wasn't really a Godzilla fan, but I took the paycheck anyway.
Yeah, having somebody with the right heart behind it's big. So
yeah, and I think especially with Raids Again and the original Godzilla, there's a magic there that actually redeems Raids Again and gives it at least a star for me, because they're trying to capture that magic. I mean, I don't think they were able to do it as well as they could have.
Definitely an A for an effort type deal.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. And they did open the door to kaiju fighting each other. After that, I mean, it was other than the solo movies like Ghidorah and Rodan, which were they were great movies, but you knew they were making them because they're going to set up for a battle.
Oh yeah, you got
down the road, type of thing. So and they took that hiatus, I guess because of the bad reviews they got.
Right. Yeah.
But then they
7
came
years.
Back, yeah.
But hey,
7 years before they make Kong and Godzilla. So they took a huge break there, but I think they learned from Raids Again and said, hey, you know what? The kaiju battle is probably where we need to be.
Yep.
And they also realized that they needed to get that demographic of kids, and
yeah, because this would be the last time we would see Godzilla as just a true hardcore villain. Was this movie?
Right. Even though technically King Kong Godzilla's supposed to be the bad guy.
Yeah, but you're...
I've read, he's supposed to be the bad guy, and people can't accept that. They get into a thing.
Yeah, well, it was because I think you were still rooting for him. Even in that film, he's supposed to be the bad guy. You're still like, come on, Godzilla.
Yeah.
But I mean, it was a good film. Like I said, it's we said it a few times before. Bottom of the total, not their dead bottom, but pretty low down there. But it opened the doors, and there was so much that happened from this film that if we didn't have this film, we wouldn't have the Godzilla series we've got today. So
yeah,
it's
that was the point I was trying to make. That it did open the door to that. I don't think we would have gotten that unless they saw that formula worked. So in that respect, it was groundbreaking.
Yep,
like
very much so.
You mentioned, they didn't do it. They didn't have these kaiju battles, and probably they saw the reviews but probably saw enough positive about the special effects in the kaiju battle to say, you know what, we might have something here, and they were right. They did have something, because after that it went on to become a legendary Godzilla. I mean, Showa is still, man, it blows me away. The Showa just blows me away.
Overall, definitely still the best of all the three series. So.
Yeah, it's still, your effects got better, but plots never got any better than the original Godzilla.
No,
I don't think so.
I think the heart, every series was good, but none of the series had the heart that the Showas had. So, which it lasted the longest for a reason, So, but
yeah, I agree. And I know I've mentioned this before, but I think the huge mistake of Godzilla '98 actually opened the door for Toho to come out with some of the best stuff that come out since the Showa. So.
Oh yeah.
People,
yeah.
Godzilla '98 did one thing. It got Toho off their butt to go make some quality Godzilla movies.
And that they definitely did.
Yeah, and they did. So that's why I give it Godzilla. This is what I always say about Godzilla '98. I know this is a little off subject. Godzilla '98 was a great monster movie. It wasn't a great Godzilla movie.
Yeah,
that's the way I always look at it. If it sat on alone and you called him something else, I'd probably like it. But you called it Godzilla, and that's what I don't like.
Right. Oh no, yeah. I think I agree with you there. I think I've heard a lot of people kind of say the similar stuff. That it's like it's a good monster film, terrible Godzilla movie.
Exactly. Yeah.
They ruined it with that.
Yeah, and so rates again, and the overall picture, of course, like you said, rates low, but I'd give it 3 stars out of 5. I mean,
I could rank it the same way.
For me.
Yeah, I think 3 out of 5 is good on that one.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't terrible, but it was in 5 stars.
Right. Yeah. And that 3 is definitely for a lot of the things that it broke ground on for us.
Yeah, it's just like I told you, I always give nostalgia. Always adds 2 stars.
Right.
Automatically.
So we get 1 star for the groundbreaking.
And then give it this one, but this one doesn't have nostalgia for me.
Well, true.
I didn't see it till I was an adult. You know what I'm saying? That's what I'm saying. Godzilla versus Monster Zero gets 2 stars for nostalgia alone, and then of course you have all these monsters, which makes it great. But Godzilla Raids Again. Well, I've never for me, I never had. I mean, I don't know how old you were when you first. How old were you when you first?
I was pretty young.
Raids
This
Again?
one, I actually saw this one was one of the first ones I saw because I remember watching it again with my father on one of those Saturday night monster movies because it was a back to back with the original one. It was like the second or third time I watched the original one, and then this one was with it. So I think if I can remember correctly, I saw the original one. Then of course '85 was the next big one. But then at that point, I had gone on and seen Smog Monster. And then it may have been Raids Again after that. It was pretty close to being one of the first ones I had seen. So for me, there is a nostalgia to it. But I think again, where even as a kid, I kind of struggle with that film. It didn't get ranked too high, but for me, yeah, it was actually one of the first ones I got to see. Thankfully, I was able to kind of do the show pretty close together.
Yeah. I was just curious because. There's nostalgia there for you on this film also. Yeah, and there was it for me. I guess you just had better TV up in your part of the country than we did down here in South Texas.
Probably, and
yeah, we only had like 3 channels, and it wasn't until we got cable, we didn't have none of that Friday night monster flicks type of thing, and even then, that was out of Houston. We had a channel, an independent out of Houston, that would show all these monster movies, and it was a double feature. It was just from 8 to 10 o'clock at night on Friday night. They did, they do the Hardy. They do. I forget his name. They do Shirley Temple, and then they go through the Tarzan movies, and then they go through Godzilla movies, and
right?
Then they go through all the Universal monster movies, and it would be, there was a pattern there, and so. That was it. So unless it came on like a once in a lifetime thing, I just get exposed to that. I think I got exposed more to those old 50s monster movies. Like I've always mentioned Tarantula because that's always one that comes to mind.
Such a good one.
Before I got exposed to Raids Again or Ghidorah even. I remember stumbling into Ghidorah one Saturday afternoon, and it was just. Like I told you, I see a Japanese actors. I stop and I look because it's either kung fu theater, kung fu theater, or it's going to be a monster movie, type of thing. That's how it was back then. And
you couldn't go wrong with either one, actually.
No,
yeah, there'd be no way. So.
Yeah, I remember old Kung Fu Theater on USA Network. Every Sunday morning was the highlight of my Sunday. It's like, oh man, they're going to show Kung Fu Theater. Got to get done with church and everything to come back and watch Kung Fu Theater.
That's awesome.
And, yeah, it was like at 11 o'clock. I don't know if you ever saw that on USA Network back when they first started out. They had what was called Kung Fu Theater every Sunday morning at 11. And that, I see a Kung Fu movie. My dad loved Kung Fu movies. In fact, I remember going to the drive-in to watch Kung Fu movies. One that sticks out is we went to go see a movie called Five Fingers of Death. I don't know if you ever.
I haven't seen it. Heard of it.
That one. So, it's a pretty well-known Kung Fu movie, and I saw that at the drive-in. My dad took me and my mom, and we went parked, in the drive-in, and looked up that theater.
That would be awesome. I
Five
remember
Fingers of Death.
Enter the Dragon with Bruce Lee was a big one for me as a child. Huge into Bruce. Well, right on. Well, so, so okay, so
but I do want to make one correction because I told you that set had all the Showa, and it does not. I have it here in my hand. It doesn't have all the Showa. It only has Mothra versus Godzilla, Ghidorah, the 3-headed monster, Terror of Mechagodzilla, all monsters attack, Invasion of the Astro Monster, and then Gojira, and of course. Raids Again. I didn't want to mislead anyone.
Oh, okay. Okay. So that is So I do have that. I just bought it individually instead of buying the full box.
Yeah. This just came in a box, and they sold them individually. But I misspoke earlier when I said it had, and I said, you know what? It doesn't have the whole show. There's no way it would.
That would be great, though.
That would, wouldn't it? That would be a dream come true. I would buy that in a second.
Oh, definitely.
That'd be pre-ordered the day it came on Amazon.
Oh yeah, and price wouldn't matter. I'd be like, I'm spending it. That's all there is to it.
That's it. It's done. But yeah, I wanted to make that correction because I didn't want any of our listeners to think this had the whole thing. It doesn't. It's still a great set, but it doesn't. It's missing a whole bunch of them.
Oh, it is. And for anybody listening, if you, I mean, you're looking to buy Godzilla films, you may not have them all. The classic media set that we're talking about for the Showa is some of the best you can find. I mean, great special features, great commentary tracks. I mean, having both versions of the film on each disc, on each release, they're great. They're some of the best releases for Godzilla I think I've ever seen.
Yeah, they were at one time they were the best. I think once Criterion comes out with theirs, that might not be the case anymore.
Probably not.
Criterion just does a great job on everything they do. It's just like you can't beat it. And
nope.
From what I've seen on Stars, Stars is already they'll do it like every Saturday or Sunday afternoon.
They've been running them.
Yeah, they've been running them, and of course Criterion, it's owned by whoever owns Stars owns the Criterion, so that's why they're
it makes sense to do that then. Yeah.
So, yeah, it is a great set. I owned a lot of them on DVD, and I went out and got this anyway because it had both versions of the film. I
was the same way. Same way with that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, again, guys, thank you all so much for joining us and listening to us talk about the next Godzilla movie, Godzilla Raids Again. Great movie, even though it's, me and Ruben definitely put it down closer to the bottom totem pole. Had a lot going for it, just definitely was a little too rushed. Definitely join us again on the next Monster Movie Stompdown. Of course, we'll have Mark returning for that one as well. But we do take a break from the Godzilla movies as we continue the Gamera 90s trilogy with Gamera 2, Advent of Legion, or Attack of Legion, or any other of the 60 names that movie seems to have for it. There's so many of them. So we're pretty excited about that one. That one's going to be really good. We're all big Gamera fans, and of course now Gamera 2 Attack of the Legion is very close to my heart. It's one of the, it's in my top 3 favorite monster movies ever, so I'm pretty excited about that one. So again, thank you guys so much. This is Sludge. Ruben?
Hey, good. Another great show, man. I had a lot of fun.
Awesome. We thank you guys so much for listening, and join us next time. Later.
Like a big shot, Nick. You just got the...
You have your fear, which might be